President Bola Tinubu has held a meeting with governors of states that share boundaries with the Niger Republic. Although the specifics of the meeting have not been disclosed to the public, a message posted on social media says that it is part of broader consultations by the president concerning the situation in Niger. The meeting, which took place on Sunday at the presidential villa, included the governors of Sokoto, Kebbi, Yobe, Katsina, and Jigawa.
Meanwhile, ECOWAS says it will hold a summit here in Abuja to discuss the crisis on Thursday. The Sunday deadline for coup leaders to step down and restore Niger's ousted president has now expired. ECOWAS has warned that it will take what it calls all necessary measures if President Mohamed Bazoum is not reinstated. Niger's military leaders remain defiant. They've closed airspace and put border forces on high alert. They also say Niger is ready to defend itself, and they're warning against any foreign aggression.
All right, let's bring in African Affairs analyst David Otto joining us now in the studio. David, good to see you again.
Thank you for coming.
It doesn't seem like the Niger putschists are ready to back down. I mean, they're calling the bluff of ECOWAS and everyone else who cares to listen. What do we make of this? What are the consequences of, this coupists having their way?
Well, the deadline expired
Yes.
yesterday, and the expectation is that ECOWAS will then react to, the ultimatum that it did make. We are not very sure because it wasn't a categorical, if the deadline expires and President Bazoum is not installed, we will carry out a military intervention.
Yeah, but they were given 7 days.
It was a possibility. So the 7 days is to fulfill that, but it doesn't necessarily mean, from ECOWAS's perspective, that 7 days expiration would be followed by a military intervention. So that would be something which ECOWAS now has to consider and see if there is a possibility that a military intervention is going to be the right decision at the right time. So I think at this point in time, what we're looking at is a situation where ECOWAS would have to evaluate the current situation. We've seen the kind of resilience that the junta in Niger has been developing around some kind of a defense mechanism, using the population as a tool to protect itself.
But what are the options before ECOWAS now?
This is why ECOWAS is having a meeting on Thursday. The options are, of course, military would be one of those options. But at what point those military intervention become the tool left in the toolbox is one of the questions that they would discuss about. There is no appetite, not in Nigeria, not in the region, for a military intervention. And that is why some of the northern leaders perhaps visited the president to talk about an acceleration of non-kinetic means and measures to not go the military way. I mean, it's important to note that if you launch a military intervention, you may have the timetable on when you go in, but you will never have the timetable on how that is going to turn out. And if actually you will achieve the mission specific, there is no guarantee that an intervention will amount, to the restoration of President Mohamed Bazoum to power, because that is merely a speculation. We do not know what the military junta has in place.
Right. David, I'm glad where you landed about what the military junta has in place, because there's an undercurrent that really bothers me. And I wonder if you're bothered about the amount of support that ECOWAS has enjoyed so far. How would you weigh the amount of support that's been given to ECOWAS, bear in mind that even the citizens of Niger are in support of the junta?
We've seen two types of support.
Yeah.
There has been an overwhelming support given to ECOWAS on the basis of condemning the military coup. Everybody supports the fact that in the 21st century we shouldn't be having a military coup.
Right.
The sanctions, have been supported albeit, people criticizing the fact that the cutting off of electricity is too harsh. But ECOWAS has received a huge amount of support regionally, internationally, on the basis of its condemnation of the military coup. What ECOWAS has, struggled with and continue to struggle with is the fact that they issued a 7-day ultimatum, talked about military intervention. That has backfired, because what has happened, in effect, is that the military junta has been able to use that as a mechanism to garner support from the local population. Right. They've used that to bring on board the support of the military junta in Burkina Faso and Mali. Of course, the support also from Guinea and other countries. There is no appetite, from the ECOWAS population. We've seen the ulamas of the north, the northern governors. Everyone talks about the fact we must not find ourselves in a position where we carry out a military intervention against a sister country. Exactly. Because we do not know if we would have achieved the aim, and we cannot estimate, the level of damage that would be.
Let's talk about the Russia factor. The Nigerians seem to be in support of Russia, wearing Russian flags, and saying we are on the side of Russia. Enough of the West that's taken advantage of our resources, over the years. But what are the potentials of this becoming an all-out regional conflict? The implications for the region, and how do you ensure that it doesn't really get out of hand?
Well, I believe that I do not subscribe to, selecting one Western power against the other, in the case of Africa. But this is what sometimes you look at the greater evil against the lesser evil. I think what we're seeing in the case of Niger is that, as we've seen also in the case of Burkina Faso and Mali, the population seems to believe that France is the bigger enemy. Let's go with a much more smaller enemy. Simply because, Russia preaches, talks about non-interference in the political affairs or in internal affairs of these military states, of these, countries. France is much more known, to have, used and misused, the opportunities that, it has, in this country. So there is now a possibility of us witnessing some kind of a split of ECOWAS between those who support, pro-Russians, those who support Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Guinea, and those who possibly would be assisted by countries like France, the United States. So we do not want to see this part of the continent, this region, being split into middle. I mean, we've condemned with the strongest terms, Russia's invasion of Ukraine without, giving any, support to any of the justifications. So we must also condemn ECOWAS, having any kind of plan, to invade another sovereign state, irrespective of the
how
justification.
altruistic really is the interest of countries like France and
of course.
US, United Kingdom, and what have you? How?
Yes, I mean, France has a huge interest in Niger. For example, 15% of its uranium is exported, to France. There is an ongoing, pipeline project, about 4,000 kilometers, 11 billion that was signed between Nigeria, Niger, which is the Trans-Saharan Pipeline Project, Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria. This was signed in Algiers last year in 2022. That project is meant to establish some kind of an alternative, to the gas that Russia has been accused of using as weaponizing, to Europe. So Europe is looking for an alternative from, Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria, to bounce, to balance the, the blockage, and the supply of gas that Russia is giving. So critically, these countries have a huge stake, to ensure that either they get this, pipeline being supplied or this gas being supplied to them, when the region is destabilized, or they get it when the region is in much stability. Usually, when the region is more stable, it becomes more expensive. When the region is destabilized, it becomes cheaper because conditions for supply of arms to ECOWAS that would intend to go to war would come from the West. The West manufactures the weapons. ECOWAS doesn't manufacture the weapons. So we do not want a situation where we're stuck halfway in the war and the condition is weapons for mineral resources. We don't want that to happen.
Thank you very much, David Otto, International Affairs Analyst, for joining us in Newsnight.